Hello, this is Najma Minhas with Global Village Space. I have with me today Mr. Tony Ashai, a Kashmiri American architect and social activist. Tony, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So Tony, I'd like to start off with a tweet that you did a couple of weeks ago where you expressed your disappointment with Kashmiris, and you talked about how much the diaspora was doing versus what was happening in Kashmir. What was it that was in your mind when you did that?
Well, actually, where that whole thing started was somebody sent me a little video clip of how two Kashmiris were fighting over petty things in Kashmir about a job or something like that. And I got thinking, I started thinking, I said, there are big things happening in Kashmir, and these people are so involved in little things. And here we are jeopardizing our business, our social contacts, and working hard. And I felt at that time that Kashmiris could do more in terms of nonviolent protests or some sort of a gesture or something like that.
So when you say nonviolent protests, what do you have in mind? Coming out on the streets or fast? I mean, what is it?
Social disobedience, like, you could easily refuse to go to work because you do not agree with the laws and the rules that people are passing, the administration is passing. You could boycott people who are part of that administration and live within your neighborhoods, and you could socially boycott them. So I felt like that there were things that Kashmiris in Kashmir could do, but they're not doing, or we don't see that. And here in America and in London, Kashmiris are really going out on the limb and trying to propagate the cause and be the voice for Kashmir.
Can you walk us through, because that would be interesting for our viewers to understand, what kind of things have you done and how successful have you actually been?
We have done a lot of advocacy in US Congress and Senate, and now the presidential campaign going on. So, we're backing Biden versus Trump, and some Kashmiris are backing Trump, but mostly Kashmiris are backing Biden. And we, we worked with a lot of congressmen, and they passed a lot of bills. And there's a lot of things that happen. Like, I give you an example, that Dr. Mubin Shah, who was jailed in India for almost 10 months, and he was the president of whatever business group in Kashmir. And he was released because there was a lot of pressure from US congressmen on Indian government.
Was he American? Was he an American Kashmiri? Is that why the pressure?
No, he was not American Kashmiri. He was Kashmiri, but there were a lot of people like that, and he was sick. He had kidney issues, but so there were a lot of these unjust arrests and things like that. So there was a lot of pressure on India. India completely underestimated the diaspora and what they could do, and they were like caught off guard, and they put their act together, and now they're like grouping up and working against us. And
so I will go to that, because I know that at some point you've also recently suffered from a vilification campaign from Indian activists, and an Indian government, in fact, BJP, have explicitly taken your name. But I want to come to that, but I'd like to stay a little bit more on what the American and Western diaspora, London diaspora, has been doing. I know that very recently also we saw these ads and videos put up on Times Square in New York, where the Kashmiri cause and the fact that Kashmiris were in siege was highlighted. Is this how you're trying to do? You're trying to increase the awareness amongst the American population, or are you targeting it towards your legislators or congressmen?
Yes, we're basically targeting towards legislators. And as far as the average American is concerned, I don't think they really care one way or the other.
Okay.
But congressmen have the power. They can make an impact with the Indian government. Our goal was that when August 5th happened last year, and how Modi basically completely put everybody in, cut their internet, telephone, TV, and put, in effect, imprison them. And we felt that, hey, we're free and we should raise our voice and speak for those people who cannot speak. And that's when Kashmiri diaspora in America got together. We had a lot of meetings, and we raised a lot of funds, and we invited a lot of legislators, congressmen, senators, and, you know, to my house, I invited a few, and everybody, they came, they met, and they heard, and they had not, a lot of these people had not heard. I remember first time I met a congressman and he was a supporter of Modi. And then when I told him who Modi was, that he belonged to RSS, and I told him that RSS was like a neo-Nazi group in India, and they hate, just like Nazis hated Jews and they hate Muslims. And he didn't believe me. He said, well, send me some documentation. So I sent him a lot of documents, and then when he got them, and he understood. And then he refused to go meet Modi in Houston, and then he supported our cause. So that's what we
That's
we
really
did.
interesting. I mean, I can't believe in this day and age, it surprises me that this congressman knew nothing. So it's interesting that you think one step is creating the awareness, and that's very much what you guys have done there. The diaspora all over the world has helped to create that.
Yes, I just want to clarify one more thing. You know, remember the tweet you talked about, the first question, and when I tweeted that, I got a lot of opposition from Kashmiris saying, "Hey, you don't know anything. You live in America and you have no clue about." And then I realized that in Kashmir it's very, very difficult to do even civil disobedience, or to even socially boycott those people who are supporting the administration. And I found that out in real life. There was a journalist, Qazi Shibli. When this whole thing was going on in Indian media, they were labeling me as ISI agent and Pakistani and all this other stuff. And this guy wrote an article in his newspaper called Kashmir Wala. And he wrote an article saying that, Tony is just being used to silence majority of Kashmiris and everything else. And then next day he was called in by the police.
Oh, wow.
And he was arrested, and he's still in jail.
Oh, wow.
Just for writing that article.
Writing an article, that's crazy. Okay.
Yes.
And I'm sure most Americans wouldn't realize that this is what is happening in India. I mean, they just don't associate India with that kind of action. So tell me a little bit about your own evolution. You've been in America since the 1990s. How actively have you been working on the Kashmiri cause? Is this a recent thing after August the 5th, or you've been on this for a while?
No, I have actually, to be honest with you, I've never, ever gotten involved in any of this kind of stuff. You know, I have friends that are in India, Pakistan, all over the world, and I never discuss politics. I never actually even discussed politics with Imran Khan when I met him 15 years ago. You know, we would talk about other things, but not politics. I know he was getting into that direction, but still never discussed it. But what happened on August 5th, it was an awakening for all of us.
For you.
Yeah, it was like whoa, you know, it's like, can this happen in this century, in this day and time, that a prime minister of a democratic country can put like 8 million people and imprison them and cut them off from rest of the world and do whatever he wants to do. So you got, people get upset, and you're like, well, I'm not going to let that happen, and then I started, what could I do? I started tweeting. And, before that, I had opened my Twitter account like in 2013, but I never used it.
Right.
So I had like 600 followers, you know what I'm saying? August 2000.
That's not bad, 600 followers since you've been not doing anything. But I mean, now you're very active, and you've got a decent following as well, I noticed.
Well, most of them are Kashmiri young people, from, they, I don't know why they're following me. They're like 30,000, almost 30,000 followers.
And are you effective? I mean, do you think it's what kind of platform do you think it is for advocating Kashmir's case? I mean, how are you finding it?
I'm a little disappointed because I feel like a lot of times, people are doing this to cater to their own ego, you know what I'm saying? And the big question is, does it really bring any change? So I actually put that tweet out there to Kashmiris, because I know there's a lot of Kashmiris that are following. I'm like, hey, I've been doing this for a year. I don't see any change on ground. Is it really worth it? I mean, why should I really continue doing this? It's been a year now, you know? I thought I will do it for a year and see what happens. And then everybody like said, no, it gives us hope. It gives us this, gives us that. Like, even though they meant, you might.
Do you think you're being realistic though? Because I mean, you mentioned that you've been doing it for a year and you've started expressing your disappointment. What about those people who've been doing it for 70 years and they still haven't got what they want? Right. Do you think you're too early in the game to express your disappointment yet?
No, I'm not disappointed. My disappointment is towards social media, not necessarily towards the whole issue. I was talking about social media. I'm saying there are two ways you can get involved in any issue in this day and time. One is social media, actively involved in social media. Other is quiet diplomacy. You could be working behind the scenes. So I don't know which one is more effective. One definitely caters to your ego. You're like, oh, all these people, I'm interacting with them, you know. And the other one, you're like a quiet guy who doesn't, you know, nobody knows him, but behind the scene meets the people and works with the congressmen, senators, the president, you know. So I'm not sure if social media really brings about the change.
Do you think that, you know, Kashmiri Americans have been also, the whole awareness issue that August the 5th brought to you and compelled you that you needed to do something. Do you think the vast majority of Pakistani and Kashmiri diaspora felt the same after August the 5th? Or did you see that there were significant numbers working on this issue before August the 5th? I mean, how would you trace the evolution of the diaspora in this issue?
No, I think I would say majority of them got activated after August 5th last year. Yes, I would say there was a small group of people that was always working, you know, and they had made associations, Kashmiri American groups and this and that, and Pakistani American, but they're not really socially active. And they're not active for a cause. They would meet for a good dinner and a chat and a talk and kawa and tea and that kind of stuff. But to actively work on an agenda, I think that was started from August 5th last year.
And then you mentioned earlier that a lot of the US presidential elections are coming up. Do you think one side might be better on Kashmir versus the other side? I mean, traditionally we associate the Democrats with Kashmir and on that policy, but Trump has actually several times, as you know, mentioned that he'd like to mediate on the issue. So is there a clear difference between the two presidential camps?
Well, definitely, you know, in the past, we actually had Republicans who supported Kashmir cause.
Oh, okay.
There was a Republican Congressman, Dan Burton, here from Indiana, in the late 90s, early 20s. He was like really spokesman for Kashmir. And we were like all ganging up behind him and writing checks for him. But then a Republican Party got hijacked by this right-wing, you know, neo-Nazi groups. And they hate everybody. They hate all brown people. So we then, of course, all Kashmiris, Indians, Pakistanis, everybody kind of shifted towards the Democratic Party, and Democratic Party accepted them and then became more vocal about their cause. But Trump is a unique case. You know, I know Donald Trump because I worked with him in the past when he was a developer. Yeah. So he is a strange person. He doesn't go with whatever party tells him to do or what he's supposed to do. He just says what he has to say. So Trump could be a great asset, great help for Kashmiris, you know.
So, I mean, would you recommend that Kashmiri Americans vote for Trump then?
Yeah, but the thing is that, you know, we could vote for him and then he could go for Modi. You know, he's really not, you know, nobody can force Trump to be in a camp that he doesn't want. And he can change. Today he could be with one camp, tomorrow. So he's very unpredictable that way.
Right. So you've recently been vilified. I mean, I saw a couple of weeks ago, a week or 10 days ago, that BJP and the Indian media, in fact, really took a go at you. What do you think is behind that? I mean, does it actually mean you were more successful on Twitter than you thought you were?
I really don't know. I mean, there could be a lot of things, because what they did is they associated me with ISI Pakistani agent, and then they connected me with Shah Rukh Khan.
Right.
And so they, I don't know if they were going after
But they
Shah
don't
Rukh
do that
Khan.
every Kashmiri, right? So was it actually because you were successful and they wanted to denounce you by creating these, all kind of links that would suit?
Well, it could be that, because I did get threatening emails, calls, that we're going to, in many words, kill you and do a lot of things. And I did get, I even have emails from people saying that we'll do to you what we did to your uncle. My uncle was assassinated by Indian forces in early 90s for doing human rights work. He used to document.
Was that the doctor Farooq?
Dr. Farooq Ashai, yeah.
So I actually didn't realize he was your uncle. Okay, yes, of course.
No, he was my uncle, and he was killed. And then, they sent me emails that we're going to do that. And then they threatened me. Then I had to change my phone number, because they got my number, WhatsApp, everything. And then I changed my phone numbers. And so, yes, I think they got, I asked people, I said, why me? I'm not the only person that tweets. There are so many people that tweet about Kashmir. And there are people in India who tweet against Modi. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But why me? And somebody told me it's because of your proximity to Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
Okay. And you've worked on Namal as well, right? I recently saw a tweet from P5 saying that you've done a lot of work on Namal. So it's because Imran Khan is aggressive, and you have worked with Imran Khan on Namal and so on. You've known him as a friend. How do you
so maybe that's why.
Way forward then? I mean, how do you see, what kind of things do you think the American diaspora, the American Kashmiri diaspora, can continue doing to highlight the issue? And especially the fact that you've now faced some of the threats. I mean, to some extent, even though you're safe, inshallah, living in America, you can empathize with Kashmiris even much more now of what they're going through.
Absolutely. So this kind of, it dawned on me, that tweet I did, that they could do more, but they're not doing. And now I understand why they're not doing it. And they've just scared the heck out of these people out there. I mean, even if they have, I don't know what it is. I mean, there's like zero tolerance for any dissent from any Kashmiri for Modi. I mean, they'll tolerate people in Delhi, in Bombay, and other places, but in Kashmir, they don't tolerate. No voice can ever speak against the administration of Modi or against, and they will be arrested, they will be taken away and put in prison for years, killed, houses blown up. So people get scared. They're scared. Plus, there's no leader out there.
What role do you think you guys can play? What role can the diaspora play on highlighting this issue? And maybe even at some point bringing it to some kind of resolution. Do you think you can play an active role like that? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think most people who live outside India or Pakistan, they understand that this issue cannot be resolved between India and Pakistan.
Right.
Because no matter what Pakistan does, India will not accept it, because India is sitting on, it's like somebody said, like it's a plot of land, somebody has already occupied it. Even though you own it, you have all the documents, that means nothing in that part of the world. So I believe that in the final stage, the only way Kashmir will ever get resolved is if there is an international pressure on India.
Okay.
And that international pressure has to be built up. And I advised Imran Khan and other people too. I said, this is going to only happen if there is pressure from other countries.
Okay.
And the pressure should be put on India to come to the negotiating table.
Okay.
Because right now, India is not even coming to the negotiating table. Imran Khan says, okay, I'm ready to talk, but India is not ready to talk. So what diaspora can play a role is if they can convince their government, whichever country they're living in, to put pressure on India to come to the table so there could be talks between India and Pakistan so it can be resolved.
Right. So, just before we leave, I'd also like to ask you what your thoughts are. Yesterday, Pakistan introduced a new political map where we finally incorporated the whole of IOK within the Pakistan map as well, with the caveat that this is subject to the UN resolution. I mean, what are your thoughts on the map? I mean, what do you think about this strategy by Pakistan?
I think it's a good strategy, but it needs to be followed by something. I think it may be a first step to multiple steps, which I don't know. I'm not privy to that. I don't know what their strategy is, what their plan is. But if it's just a map and throwing it out there, it doesn't do anything. But if it's a map that justifies an action that Pakistan's going to take, whether it's political or support to Kashmiris based on this map, I think then that would be a good step. But if it's just a map, it doesn't really do anything.
Okay. So when you say strategy, what is it, that strategy that you have in mind? Because the first thought that came to my mind is, what message is Pakistan sending? Pakistan is saying Kashmir in 1947 was ours and should have been ours. And now we are finally saying that it is ours, and therefore we're incorporating it within our political map. But at the same time, we've given that caveat of saying subject to UN resolution. I mean,
right.
Do you agree with the fact that Kashmir should be part of the Pakistan map? Because that's a statement, right? You're saying something.
Yeah, well, I agree with the fact that Kashmiris should have a right to choose their own destiny. I mean, that's what our struggle is for. Whether Kashmiris choose Pakistan or not Pakistan, that should be their right. And I am of the opinion that majority of Kashmiris will choose Pakistan.
Okay.
And that's why India is afraid to hold plebiscite. That's why India will never do a referendum until the point they're sure that majority will choose India. So they will delay it. So the fact that India doesn't allow it tells me that majority of Kashmiris want Pakistan, not India.
Right.
But
thank you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.